Hey, Sean, thanks for joining us today. As we're getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Okay, sure. I won't start way back at birth, but I started my career in consulting, management consulting, and I think that was a good cornerstone of my career because it taught me that you earn your keep 1 hour at a time, right? And then from there, I moved on to startups. I was at the It was the largest independent IPO at the time. It was a company called MP3.com. It was like a music startup. Did
Yeah.
did fairly well. I was there before the IPO. Went through that, and then I started doing founding and like CEO type gigs at startups. My It's not much of a claim to fame, but I had the largest ringtone company at the time. If you bought, I know, but if you bought a ringtone in 2003, if you were a 14-year-old
That
girl,
was a big business.
it was, yeah, it
Yeah.
was, pennies at a time, but it was a river of pennies. And we ended up selling that company and did pretty well. And since then, have been working at a number of startups, founding startups. Some have succeeded, some have failed, frankly. And then I was wondering about the next thing to do, and there was this company here in San Diego uh, that was looking for a CRO, and they said, who's the best BD guy we know in San Diego, and that guy wasn't available, so they got me instead. So, but interesting thing about this company, Wildfire, where I am now, and this is going back three and a half, 4 years now. Um, it is a get the band back together kind of story where everybody on the senior team has worked together at some company in the past in some capacity or another. And I'm talking about going back, 20 years.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people tell you the importance of hiring the right team, particularly at a startup. And I can't tell you how important that has been for us to be able to throw blind passes, right? Someone's going to catch it, and I think we're getting a lot more done with a smaller team than maybe some other startups at our phase of growth. And speaking of which, Wildfire, I'll tell you about that company.
Sure.
Wildfire is a white label, totally B2B loyalty and rewards platform. I think your audience is probably familiar with Capital One shopping. If you've turned on a TV in the past 3 years
Yeah.
or so, you've seen
Customer.
Samuel L. Jackson say, "Hey, get cash back when you go shopping." It's a fair comparison to say Wildfire is a white label version of that. And so other banks and financial institutions from the largest, that's kind of the center of our target, down to the smallest fintechs that want to add this kind of shopping functionality for their customers, they can partner with us and we'll give them the tools to do that. In its simplest expression, you can envision it as an extension that you put on your browser. You set it and forget it. You go shopping. When you land at an eligible merchant, then this thing pops up, says, "Hey, do you want to get 5% cash back from Macy's, brought to you by your brand," that kind of thing. And then they press that button. Yes, I want that. They go shopping as usual, and then everyone makes money. So it's a really great product. It's a strong consumer proposition, and I think from the point of view of the companies that we sell to, like I mentioned, mainly financial institutions, there is a big, like, a paradigm shift happening now where I think when you and I think of our bank, we've thought of it maybe 5 years ago or so as like the place where I temporarily store my auto deposited paycheck
Yeah.
until I blow it all at the end of the month, right? It's kind of a back office function. And I'm just coming off of our annual, it's called Money 2020. It's like the gathering for the whole industry. It was in Vegas. And 100% of the banks that I talked to said they have a strategy to shift that perception into a more consumer centric companion kind of mode where they want to help you stretch your dollar further. Things like advisory, investing advice and stuff like that. And maybe one of the cornerstones of that strategy is loyalty and reward. So I
Loyalty.
think, yeah, we sort of got the wind at our backs now.
Well,
But
it sounds powerful, but doesn't sound simple to sell, though.
no, no, no. Thank you for saying that. I am familiar with that fact. The
You didn't need me to point that out.
yeah, well, it's a complex sell.
Yes.
And what I have learned, and the advice that I would give to anyone in your audience who is at an early stage startup that's selling to these very,
Big.
very large guys, a very David and Goliath kind of story,
Yes.
you you have to adjust your process and your style to how they need to be communicated with. So, as a small startup that's burning cash every month, we think in terms of weeks, maybe months at the farthest. We want to get things done quickly. Speed is on your side if you can make that happen. When you're dealing with companies that think in quarters and years, you have to develop a BD process that is going to be structured enough to give them what they want. So when I landed here, the uh, the rather nominal CRM experience that had been set up, and rightfully so for the stage of the company that it was at the time, it was things like the stages were early, you know, feels strong, early advance, that sort of thing. Very kind of impressionistic views of where you are at in the funnel. And one of the first things that we did was say, look, we're going to develop some deal stages here that are four things: required, factual, inspectable, and most importantly, buyer centric. And there's only four, well, there's five of them. One is pitch received, and I'll tell you, you'll do 10 first pitches when you're talking to a large FI. You get the BD people on the phone, and they say, "Oh, this is great. I got to get Bob involved." And then Bob comes, next week. "Oh, this is great. I got to get Susie involved." And that's totally fine. That's part of the structure of building some consensus. But from pitch received, there's like I said, 10, a dozen meetings, or whatever I'm going to describe in a minute, that gets us to product fit signed off. Literally, like, yes, we know what it is, we know how it fits. That's what we're going to do. And then from there, the next step that you've got is contract received. And okay, great. That takes a while to get through legal with these large companies and stuff like that. The contract is signed. And that's not even the starting line. Again, for companies that think in quarters and years, you may sign a contract and they may not launch for 3, 6, 9 months later, that sort of thing. And that's important to manage, because when you're in a B2B business such as ours, where the engine of your revenue generation is their revenue generation, it's a rev share model. You want
Okay.
to bring them forward as quickly as possible. And let's get to that launch. Let's get this stuff in front of consumers and make it go. So I was saying before, that bit between that first pitch and we've got everyone on board, and the product fit is signed off. There's a slew of meetings that we have that are designed to give them the inputs they need to build their business case internally. So it's big companies. No one person could make a decision, right?
Of
It's
course
it
not.
is
No.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
a big
huge.
group of people, and it's got to run up the flagpole, and there are a lot of stakeholders and different groups that have to be involved. That's great, nothing wrong with that. Our job then is to give them the inputs they need to build a business case. Literally, we structure it that way. It's a great welcome to the party here. Our next meeting next week is going to be the economics and cost review. I'm going to give you what the unit economics should look like across the board from all of our existing partners, what the cost structure is, et cetera, et cetera. Great. That's the first thing they need. The next one is going to be the cost for them. What's my LOE here? I've got to get engineering involved and have them understand, are they building a bread box? Are they building a Volkswagen car, something like that. So then we get the technical integration stuff signed off. Then it goes over to product. They need to know what the scope of work is going to look like, because they've got to involve marketing and all these other people and stuff like that. So that's another meeting, completely structured with assets, everything they need to understand, with case studies from other partners of ours, like best practices, who's done it right, all that kind of stuff. Great. Now we have an SOW and we get that signed off. From there, it's the marketing, right? I mean, banks are very good at marketing some pretty high involvement products.
Yep.
Credit cards are hard thing to sell.
They are.
You've got to do a credit check. You need my social security number. I mean, it's hard. So, but this product, while it's maybe easier for them to sell to their consumers a lower involvement product, they just haven't done it before. Whereas we have a bunch of best practices from a bunch of other companies, and we literally hand every one of our partners a marketing playbook that says, do this, not that, and over time this should be your growth rate. There's some other things we have to do, UI, UX best practices, but every one of those meetings, and we've now gotten it down. Well, sales is never science, but we've gotten this BD process to a degree down to a bit of a science where we've anticipated every input that they need to build a business case internally, so that there's no rock left unturned. We deliver that, and now it's, where do you want to sign? So that, I think, has been the biggest cornerstone of our success managing our growth upward when you're selling to these gigantic companies. It has been our ability to structure our BD process in a way that suits their needs rather than us trying to sell the product. We're selling, the pain that we're solving for them, and we're
Yeah.
showing it with numbers and results and that sort of thing.
And you said rev share. Is there any product revenue that comes before rev?
Yeah. So at a more detailed level, when we're selling a platform like this, there are some fees that are associated with the
Okay.
product. We've got to keep the lights on, and frankly, I think you know very well that there is a weeding out function there as well. If you
Yep.
can't afford the whatever thousands of dollars a month that it costs to buy the product that's going to generate this revenue for you, maybe you're not the partner for us. And no insult intended there at all. It's just that the partners we've seen be successful are the ones who build a business around this, not treat it as a project that's going to get shelved and like a box that gets checked. And so we structure our basic deal as a fees plus the rev share. And while the fees can add up across multiple partners, I should say that it is the smallest amount of revenue that we make. We are intentionally trying to push as much of our upside into the success of our partners, because that, as a startup, that is the bit that scales.
And give us a sense of how many of these deals you do a year. Is it five? Is it 50? Is it 500? Is it?
That's great. I've got this other screen here. I was just looking at our pipeline and how far we've come this year. There are a lot of big ones. I'm sorry, there aren't a lot of big ones, but there are a lot of deals in general. But overall for this year, I'd say we've closed from the entire pyramid no more than 40 deals.
Okay.
And the largest of which I announced a couple of weeks ago was with Visa, $500 billion company, and they're going to be reselling our platform all over the world. It's like, wow, that's a big deal. That's great. The smallest of which would be a recent fintech. There's a company called Givebacks that I'm such a huge fan of. And um, their model is to give this functionality to their users, like PTAs and that sort of thing, who want to use their earnings not for their own benefit, but to give it to their charity, that sort of thing. And so, big difference between those companies.
Yeah.
But we're, I guess, to some degree in a target-rich environment. But I should say, there just aren't that many big banks in the
Right.
world. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? So the all of that whole structured approach that I just mentioned to you was built intentionally to come at those kinds of partners with seriousness and with an understanding that we understand what's important to them, and level of um, that level of sophistication is what they require, but it's absolutely what the mid-tier and lower tier partners of ours appreciate as well. We are very buttoned up in our approach, because there's no other way to sell to these people. But I'm glad you pointed that out. This is absolutely not a volume business. We will never have 1,000
No.
individual partners.
Yeah.
We're always going to be very bespoke, uh, aiming at creating quality partnerships and not just like spraying and praying.
And did your consulting background give you this kind of vantage point? Because this is not the typical vantage point that I
I,
hear from sales people or sales leaders.
that's why I mentioned it before. I I learned early in my career that adding value, particularly when you're adding value 1 hour at a time, literally that's how you bill, will always give you a perspective that that in sales, when you do get there, and everyone finds their way there if they're smart, but when you get there, adding value, I don't care what you're selling, is what your customer is going to appreciate. Sometimes people, we've all heard this adage that, he could sell ice to Eskimos, like that's some kind of benefit. I think that's the most pejorative thing that you could say about
Right.
someone,
That's
because anyone who,
persuasion. That's not.
yeah, anyone who goes to Alaska and is selling ice to Eskimos, a week later, these Eskimos are sitting around with their ice saying, we didn't need this. Now, the next time you go back to the well, are they going to buy more ice from you? Absolutely not. Right. When we're in this environment, we are selling value. We are selling a relationship that is going to last years and years and years, and adoption rates take a long time to happen. And we have to make sure that we are selling them exactly what they need and adding value every step of the way. And I think you're right to point out, I think, a very non-traditional path into sales. I didn't start out as a rep. I've never worked in a boiler room and learned, the emotional aspect of selling and that sort of thing. I think it's there over time. But I feel like a much more structured approach to creating value for our partners is, particularly for large partners who think in billion-dollar product launches, is the only way that we could possibly be successful.
And so, how do you hire and train reps to do this? Because most are not used to doing this. That they're used to.
That's that is 100% true. And I will tell you, we're still a small company, fewer than 50 people. You are looking at one third of the BD team. I have two. I have two guys
And
who
that's
who
not by weight, right? That's by head
well,
count.
so by head count, yes, thank you for pointing that out. So I've got two guys who work on my team, and their nicknames are Tex-Mex and Sweater Vest. And they embrace those. I'm not joking at all. They embrace those nicknames in a big way. So Tex-Mex, he's of Mexican descent and he lives in Texas. That seems like it fits. But the reason he embraces that nickname is because he is so spicy in his approach. Like he's very he could develop a deep emotional relationship with you inside of 5 minutes. He just
Yeah.
knows how to feel people and
Situations.
yeah, and situation, relate to them and find that nugget. And now he becomes your trusted friend and advisor, and he works through the same process we all do, but he gets there from a much more emotional, intelligent kind of point of view. On the other side of the spectrum here is Sweater Vest, who we call him that because he's just so buttoned up.
Yeah.
He gets to the same place because of his attention to detail and his professionalism, and he's just the most trustworthy person that you ever meet because he's giving you everything you need. It's all factual. I trust him, right? So two very different personalities, but I think when you ask me, how do I train them? Where we come together, where we all come together, is through this process, which gives us the structure to um, to give our partners what they need while still being expressive as individuals. And it gives us the room to kind of get to different deals in different ways. But I really do rely on structure. I My adage is that the hardest part about swimming is working your way out of the burlap sack. And
Yeah.
you jump into an environment, and if you can't learn, how the things are done, and you can't adjust to a structure that is going to help you in your job, but mostly it's up to you to do the job,
Yep.
then I honestly I can't help you because I'm not a sales manager. I don't know how to train a salesperson. You know what I mean? I just know how to give them the structure and the tools that they need, and the rest of them is up to them. The rest of it is up to them. And I
Did
should
you?
say, I'm not hiring. Yeah, I'm not. I'm hiring senior people too. I should say that.
It
Like these
sounds it.
aren't, junior reps who actually need the training.
And did you know either of these guys before, or did you hire them?
No, but I should say that's a great question. I should say that both of them were vetted through our network of advisors, board members, and
Okay.
that sort of thing. I think we're small enough now that we are lucky to be able to hire people in that way who come with sort of a stamp of approval already. Maybe I didn't work with you directly before, but you worked with someone that I know has been successful, and so you're kind of pre-approved. That goes a long way. And I do recognize with scale, we we may not be able to do that, but again, I believe that with our structured process that works, for the B2B environment we're in, tiny companies selling to big companies, I really think that's the cornerstone of our BD success there. I think that we could do this with pretty much anyone who came in through the doors. That having been said, I think that we're going to get there with a relatively small team. I was looking at the CRM. We have 130 active deals right now between three people. Our close rate's about 20%, not bad. And at other companies with these kinds of involved deals like this, I've seen reps handle maybe a maximum of 20, maybe
Right.
25, and we're definitely over indexing there. Again, I think that our process is the crutch that's allowing us to do that, and getting us through these deals. But it's a long sales cycle. It does take a while.
And was somebody else doing this before you showed up, or were you the first business
Well,
development person?
right. So small companies like this. Let me back up here and just tell you where we're at in our stage. So Wildfire, uh, let's see, let's call it 14, 15 months ago, closed an A round of funding. So usually a startup that's at that stage is kind of moving beyond mere existence to survival.
Yeah.
That's the term.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with finding product market fit. And some companies don't really find product market fit after a couple of pivots, that sort of thing, and they kind of get there, and maybe they run out of money, they do a B round, and maybe they get there. But there is this inflection point in every startup's history where you go from just existing and you've got an idea, and maybe you attracted a team based on that idea, to where you start to survive. And the way that you get into survival mode is by finding that product market fit. And I think you've probably seen this as well in your career. I know you coach a lot of sales teams and companies and that sort of thing. There's that point at which you landed that one big deal that kind of got you over that hump. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is validation of your product market fit. And from there, maybe it's not a flywheel. It's still very hard to get things done. But now you've got a lighthouse that you can point to and say, look, we now know that we have something that we can sell to the market, even if that market right now is one. But there are other companies like that, and we can sell more of this stuff. And that's where you start moving into like the success phase, right? And I think that's the transition we're making now. I mentioned that one big deal with Visa. We had closed, some other big deals before that, Microsoft notably. Um, and and on the back of those successful deals that now we can point to, and we have stats, that we can use in our sales process to say, if you do this, then you're going to make this. That makes accepting that business model internally for our prospective partners a lot easier, because there's analogs they can point to. And so we're sort of moving up into that success phase, and then after that, it's anyone's guess as to how big we get, but it's going to be driven directly by the number of those kinds of large and medium, even small partners that we get into the marketplace with consumers that go shopping.
And was that first deal kind of a friends and family deal or a
It's
networked
Yeah, so
deal?
so that happened right before I landed. And I think that that's when they started looking for a BD guy, right? I am a huge believer that an early stage startup needs to be able to have a team that can sell the product without a sales guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so the CEO, if you believe in your product and you know how to, you should know how to pitch it better than anyone else. That first deal should come from the founding team, and it's at that point where you say, okay, now we're going to move into an expansion mode here. We've got to get someone who's dedicated to this function. So yes, I should say that first deal absolutely came from the founding team working hard and diligently to make the deal happen, and then point to that and say, if is there someone who can give us more of these? Yes. Okay, great. Let's go find that person.
Now, I got to imagine that they think, or the founders think, it's a lot easier to sell it than the person who is selling it.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
That's what I
actually,
ran into every time.
yeah, like just do it, right? It's so easy. This thing
Yeah,
sells
it's
itself,
hot. It's
right? Yeah.
amazing. Don't they say, can't you say it? You're talking to the
Uh,
wrong person.
in our case, that is not the case here at this company. Everybody recognizes that this
Complexity.
is not a difficult. It is not an easy thing to sell. It's a very involved, multi-step process dealing with large companies. And the CEO, Jordan Glazer, I consider him to be on my team. I may not get 100% of his time, but he and I sell side by side, particularly given our model, right? That this is about building partnerships, and they want trust, and they want the most senior people on the team to vet that we're going to be there with them. So no, I think that perhaps we're a bit unique in that no one here thinks that this is an easy job for the salespeople. However, I should also say that everybody is involved in the sales process, really, because of what I described. All of those meetings that we are having with these prospective partners to give them the inputs they need to build their business cases internally. Well, guess what? The marketing discussion, I've got to pull in my marketing team because they're the experts there, and they give them, product team. Yep, we do multiple product deep dives, particularly with large companies when we're developing these SOWs that are, 100 pages long, right? And so I've got to bring in, that part of the team as well. Merchant development, the tech team, everyone comes into the conversation at one point. Yes, the BD team is facilitating all of that, but in a small company where you're effectively laying siege to these large companies to give them what they need to build their case internally, it really does take everybody. So I don't know that is particularly unique for a small company. That may frankly be the norm, but I think what that's done for us is um, it's given everyone an appreciation that this is a team effort, and that's the only way that any of these deals get closed. We're really not selling widgets, and so it's a bit of a different animal.
And I got to imagine it's hard to find the person who cares or is responsible for this within the large bank or credit card company or
Oh my
financial.
gosh, finding the front door to an organization with 100 front doors can be very, very trying. And
Yes.
I'm really glad you brought this up because a cornerstone of our BD strategy is the network around us. We have very intentionally uh, brought investors to the table. We've brought other like board members to the table, advisors who can make those high level intros to the right people at the right time. And so I can appreciate that most companies, sales teams' biggest problem, particularly in the case where they're selling to these massive organizations, probably it's just finding the right person to talk to. That's where we have been extremely fortunate to have the right people around us that can say, "Oh, you want to talk to, the president of this giant bank? No problem. Like, no problem. Here's the intro." Now, whether that person is receptive, um, or if they're, that's a completely different story, right?
Right.
So that's where we take over, and we still have to do our job in a big way. but we absolutely have access, but not to everywhere. So you're absolutely
Yeah.
right to point it out that I've got a white whale that I'm chasing that that is exactly this problem. Yeah, every time I get a little traction with someone who's like, oh yeah, no, this will be great, this will be great. They either get reorged or it's a revolving door and
That's
they're
true
gone. I get a
too.
bounce on an
Yeah.
email. It's like, how long have you been there? So that is a I think that's just an unavoidable problem of corporate America in general. But in that regard, I think we do actually quite well. And then the other side of that coin is, I think, uh, we're finding that they never really say no. They
Right.
say they say not now, right?
Yeah.
They say, call me back in Q4 or whatever, that sort of thing, because I think there's a recognition that what we're doing makes sense. But
Yeah.
again, we're dealing with massive companies that have a literal plan of record for next year. Here are the projects we're doing, and if it's not on that list, it's not getting
Getting
done.
done. Yeah.
And even moving into uh, an economy where there's some economic anxiety, and big companies want to try and get ahead of that. There are some austerity measures that we're starting to see. Hey, just want to let you know this may be on the chopping block, and we've got to dig deep and make sure we're not, that sort of thing. But again, corporate America moving at a glacial pace like that, they are allowed to make decisions in that way, which can be a company killer for a small startup. So you want to make sure that you spread that risk as far and wide as you can, and make sure that you're not betting on just one company. But it is an absolute reality that your internal champion could be gone in 6 months, not because maybe because they got fired, I don't know, but just because there was another opportunity where
Right.
they went or something like that. And so my advice to my team is always never rely on one
On one
person.
person.
We are selling to a company, and that company has stakeholders, and we need everyone involved. And that's another reason we structure our process the way we do.
Cool. Hey, Sean, really appreciate your time today. How can people follow you?
Well, I am on LinkedIn. I think that's the only social anything that I've got. So if you want to look for Sean Conahan there, that's a great way to get in touch with me. There's also wildfire-corp.com is where our company is. A pretty lightweight site. I got to be honest. We're not a consumer company, so we're just hoping that you'll find the right BD people and get to us that way. But other than that, I really appreciate you having me on. I'm a big, like I said before, I'm a big fan of the show. So this is quite an honor.